I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment. We're going to begin this Thursday morning with a decision by the Federal Reserve to keep interest rates steady. That move, not a surprise, despite pressure from the White House to lower rates. The Fed says, yes, we have seen economic growth in the first half of the year, but inflation remains somewhat elevated. Two Federal Reserve Board members, both appointed by President Trump, dissented from the decision. That is something that has not occurred in more than 3 decades. President Trump, for his part, slammed Fed Chair Jerome Powell's decision.
We should be the lowest interest rate, and we're not. We're 38, number 38, because of the Fed. It's all because of the Fed. He's done a bad job.
One thing we do know the Fed is keeping an eye on, President Trump's trade policies. Just yesterday, the president announced higher tariffs on India and Brazil, while lowering tariff rates on South Korea. In other news out of Washington, the Supreme Court announced that justices will meet in September to discuss Ghislaine Maxwell's case. She's appealing her 2021 conviction on sex trafficking charges related to the Jeffrey Epstein case. The White House has been under ongoing pressure to release files on the convicted sex offender. A lot to talk about. In a moment, we'll have more on the Fed's interest rate decision when we check in with Investopedia editor-in-chief Caleb Silver. Let's kick things off with NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba from Washington. Monica, good morning. So first up, the Jeffrey Epstein case. Tell us about the Supreme Court's decision to actually hear Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction appeal at the beginning of the fall term. And also, the Justice Department laid out arguments this week for the release of grand jury transcripts in both the Epstein and Maxwell criminal cases. What are we learning there?
Yeah, Joe, exactly. So this is the appeals process that is going to be playing out for Ghislaine Maxwell. And remember, one of the terms for her attorney laying out this idea that she could perhaps testify before Congress, they're saying she could do that, but not until this process plays out. And so we know likely this will happen in a couple of months, as the Supreme Court has indicated. And then there will be a question of whatever happens with that case. After that, maybe then we could see some congressional testimony from her, though remember, she's trying to seek congressional immunity, and right now the Oversight Committee is saying that they won't grant that. But this also raises some questions about what might happen with the Department of Justice, as remember that Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, met with her for a couple of days and said that he was going to be able to share some information from those discussions, quote, at an appropriate time. But you have to think maybe that won't take place until after this plays out, unclear. And on the point of the grand jury transcripts, this has been a point that the Department of Justice and the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, have been trying to make, saying that it is in the public's interest to try to unseal some of these, even though the courts are saying they would have to redact them pretty heavily, and it's unclear that there would be enough of a justification to do that at this point. Joe.
Talk about the announcement yesterday that sent some shockwaves through the Democratic Party. Former Vice President Kamala Harris says she will not run for California governor next year, ending months of speculation there. Did she give a reason, and is it possible that she will run for president again in 2028?
It's possible, Joe, and Democrats were, of course, watching that very, very closely. And really the idea here is by opting not to run for governor of California, Kamala Harris can kind of preserve her option to run for president again in 2028 if she decides to do so. And we're told that right now her focus is on the present moment and not on making a decision about that yet, that she's going to try to help other Democrats who may call upon her or may not, because relitigating 2024 ahead of the midterms and for upcoming races may be really difficult and something that Democrats want to avoid. But we're told that really over the last month or so, she gathered with advisors and she tried to make this decision and felt that even though she loves California, remember she was a senator from there, this just wasn't the right job to pursue at this time. She doesn't want to be in elected office in this moment, but she wasn't ruling it out potentially for the future. Joe.
Monica, let's get more into the Fed's decision yesterday to keep interest rates steady. We know the president and Fed Chair Jerome Powell, they have a contentious relationship, to put it mildly, right now. We just heard a bit of the president's reaction to the decision, but what else are we hearing from the White House?
Yeah, and remember that the White House has been trying to pressure Jerome Powell, and Jerome Powell said even yesterday that he's not going to bow to any of that kind of pressure. He's very proud of the independence of the central bank and said that he appreciated the president's visit last week. He said it was an honor to sit down with him, but that, again, he wasn't going to entertain any of this political pressure. The president, for his part, continues to just rail against him, but has sort of backed off this idea that he could fire him. Remember, he would need cause in order to do that, which at this point it doesn't seem he has. has, but also his term, Jerome Powell, that is, will end next year, May of 2026. So at this point, it seems the president is going to just let him run out the clock on that, even though he has continually expressed his displeasure with him.
All right, Monica Alba kicking us off this hour. Thank you so much. Let's get some analysis on the Fed's decision to keep interest rates steady with Investopedia's editor-in-chief, Caleb Silver. So this move, of course, not a surprise. What everyone was really waiting to do was hear what Jerome Powell had to say about the future, about September. Let's listen to a little of what he said.
We have made no decisions about September. We don't do that in advance. We'll be taking that information into consideration and all the other information we get as we make our decision at the September meeting. It's been a very dynamic time for these trade negotiations and lots and lots of events in the intermeeting period. But we're still, a ways away from seeing where things settle down. There are many uncertainties left to resolve.
So these comments sent stocks a little bit lower yesterday. Why is that? What's the reaction to what Powell had to say?
I think there was a lot of anticipation that the Fed might cut later this fall, maybe a quarter point in September, maybe another quarter point in December. But the Fed chair has been very clear. Without clear information on tariffs and what it's going to do to consumer prices, what it's going to do to the labor market, no reason to cut interest rates right now. When you look at the economy, we have almost full employment, 4.1% unemployment. We'll get an update on that tomorrow with the July jobs report. And inflation ticking a little bit higher, especially in some of the areas you might expect. Apparel imports, auto part imports, that's pushing prices higher. A Fed cut now, a rate cut now, might trigger more inflation on top of what might be more inflation coming as soon as tomorrow.
If we read between the lines here, is Powell essentially saying, hey, if we back off this tariff policy, then yeah, we're going to lower interest rates, or is that taking things too far?
Maybe too far, but what he's saying is without clarity, without giving us a concrete, clear tariff policy that companies and industry can actually depend on and put numbers to, why cut rates right now? There's no reason, again, to trigger new inflation when we know more inflation is coming in the form of higher prices due to the tariffs that will go into effect as soon as tomorrow and this weekend.
As I mentioned, there were those two dissenting votes. Talk about how significant that is and how unprecedented or rare that is.
Yeah, for Fed geeks like us, dissenting votes, especially two of them, are pretty rare. So Christopher Waller, he's a Fed appointee. Michelle Baumann, also a Trump appointee. They are both dissenting and did not actually vote for holding rates where they are. Now, this could be jockeying to see who might be the new Fed chair. But also, there are some Fed governors, and it's not just Fed Chair Powell who makes the decision on interest rates. There are 12 Fed presidents that make this decision. They maybe think that you should cut rates now so you don't, if we do see a spike in unemployment, we can temper that with lower interest rates.
Yeah, it's important to remember a lot of people might think there's one person here. It's more than one person making these decisions. So when we talk about tariffs, we know yesterday the Trump administration put higher tariffs on both India and Brazil, lower ones on South Korea. What could be the impact of these decisions?
Well, what's interesting is that all of these trade deals that he's making, especially the ones that have the lower tariff rates and threaten, all promise investment from that country into the United States. So that's kind of the formula. You've seen it before. You see it with Europe. Now you're seeing it with South Korea. We're probably going to see maybe more movement around it with Thailand and Cambodia. But the three big trading partners we want to pay attention to are Canada, Mexico, and China. Canada looks very far away from a deal. China, it sounds like they're talking. Maybe we'll have something later this fall. And Mexico is very uncertain right now. But those are our three biggest trading partners.
All right. Caleb Silver, as always, good to have you with us. People all along the Pacific Rim are breathing a sigh of relief this morning. Tens of millions from Japan to America's West Coast were bracing for the possibility of destructive tsunami waves after that powerful earthquake off the coast of Russia. But researchers say we avoided a worst-case scenario. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz has the latest from Hawaii.
Tsunami alerts issued as far away as South America. After that massive 8.8 magnitude earthquake, one of the largest ever recorded, struck off Russia's Pacific coast, sending people rushing out of crumbling buildings. Portions of the ceiling collapsing on travelers at an airport. Doctors here seen mid-surgery, desperately trying to stabilize a patient. Tremors shattering this Russian kindergarten building, the entire wall falling away. Thank God there were no children inside, he says. The quake happening along the Pacific's Ring of Fire. The first tsunami spotted in this small fishing village. You can see those buildings floating away. In Japan, millions evacuated, some flocking to rooftops. And in the U.S., tsunami warnings issued up and down the West Coast.
We decided to go to elevated ground.
Hawaii braced for the worst.
It can move cars, it will throw fences around. If it hits, it can dislodge trees.
Honolulu in gridlock as residents race to get away from the coast. Tourists at beachfront hotels forced to seek shelter above the 4th floor. Hundreds crowding in resort hallways for hours. Airlines canceling flights. The Coast Guard ordering all commercial vessels to evacuate harbors.
They left without us. Hold on, I'll show you. There they are. They're leaving us.
Mandy Berry said she had to stay the night in a Hilo shelter after her tour bus didn't make it back before her cruise ship left port.
My first thought was, why are they closing the gate? And then my second thought was, wow, this is really happening. They're really going to leave us.
Waves crested to over 5 feet in some areas, but no major injuries or damage reported.
Here in Hawaii, officials are crediting that early alert system. Despite some of the traffic that people experienced, it did give folks more than 4 hours to be able to safely get away from the coast. Back to you.
All right, Liz, thank you. Let's turn to NBC meteorologist Angie Lassman, who's tracking those heat alerts across the South this morning, and hopefully, we hope, some relief for us here in the Northeast. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Yes, relief. That is the word that everybody has been hoping that I would say over the past couple of days. And finally, we do have some relief in some spots. Now, you'll notice we've still got 52 million people under heat alerts. Most of those are focused across parts of the Southeast and stretching to the Southern Plains. Those are going to stick with us, unfortunately, for the next couple of days. We're still going to see the heat and humidity across that region, but we're slowly but surely starting to get a little bit more relief in the picture for our friends across parts of the northern tier of the eastern half of the country. So Boston, you're topping out at just 76 degrees today, back towards the Great Lakes and parts of the northern and even central plains. You are much more comfortable with high 70s to low 80s for your temperatures this afternoon. Notice the 90s and triple-digit heat index values from Washington, D.C. to Raleigh to Memphis, even 104 degrees for the actual temperature in Dallas today. We look ahead to tomorrow, and more of that cool air starts to filter in closer to the coast. We've got New York City ending up just into the mid-70s. That temperature way below normal for where we should be. It'll rebound by the time we get into the weekend. Unfortunately, if you're looking for the cool air across the South, well, you're going to have to wait a little while longer. We're going to keep it quite warm over the next couple of days. Now, one caveat to this is the cold front that's bringing us the relief is also bringing us some rain, and it could be impactful, especially for your afternoon commute today. So here's what we've got going on right now. Across the Northeast and stretching back into the Midwest, we've got the rain. Indianapolis, Buffalo, you've been in and out of those showers all day this morning, or all day so far. We've got flood alerts up for 46 million people across the Northeast, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., all included in that. And here's why. We've got this batch of rain that's going to slide to the east as that cold front works to the east. This is going to slow down your afternoon commute. We're likely going to see some urban flooding, and the potential for flash flooding is going to be there as well. Notice, though, also we've got a severe threat. So Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. has that slight risk. This means wind gusts, damaging hail, and the potential for tornadoes today. It's on the low end, but it's not zero. And most importantly, Joe, we've seen how the subway platforms flood in recent rains. We have the potential to see hourly rainfall rates 1 to 3 inches. Subways only can take, 1 inch and 3/4 per hour. So this is going to be something that we'll watch today, likely issues across that region through the afternoon commute.
Something to keep in mind. All right, Angie, thank you so much. There is relief in Arkansas. A suspect is now in custody in the killings of a couple who were murdered while hiking with their 2 young daughters. After a days-long manhunt, 28-year-old James Andrew McGann was arrested yesterday at a barbershop in Springdale. He's now charged with 2 counts of capital murder. Clinton and Kristen Brink were fatally attacked on Saturday while hiking at Devil's Den State Park. Their 7- and 9-year-old daughters were with them, but they were not hurt. Authorities have still not said how the couple was killed or what the motive may have been. A former dentist from Colorado will now spend the rest of his life in prison after he was convicted of murdering his wife. A jury found James Craig guilty of poisoning her food and medication over time, killing her. NBC News correspondent Camila Bernal has more details from the courtroom.
It took the jury just about 8 hours to render its verdict.
We, the jury, unanimously and beyond a reasonable doubt, find the defendant, James Craig, guilty of murder in the first degree.
Jurors finding former Colorado dentist James Craig guilty of killing his wife Angela in 2023, who he cheated on for years. Surrounded by his lawyers, Craig showed little reaction as 6 guilty counts were read by the judge. The jury finding he deliberately and methodically poisoned his wife's protein shakes, doctored her pills, and injected her IV, killing her over the course of several days.
She was strong, and she knew who she was. She could command a room just by entering it.
Angela's family speaking to the court.
He was supposed to be my hero, and instead he'll forever be the villain in my book. And it hurts so bad every day.
The jury also finding Craig guilty on all charges related to his attempts to cover up his crime. Craig's defense team asking for immediate sentencing.
Dr. Craig unleashed a path of destruction as wide as a tornado and just as devastating.
The judge declaring he will spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. Camila Bernal, NBC News.
We are learning more about the gunman involved in this week's deadly shooting in an office building here in New York. Police say Shane Tamura shot and killed 4 people Monday night with an AR-15 style rifle before dying by suicide. NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin has more on how Tamura got the weapon and what investigators found inside his Las Vegas home.
Law enforcement sources say Shane Tamura bought this AR-15 style rifle from a former coworker for $1,400. Police say he'd go on to use the weapon to kill 4 people at 345 Park Avenue before taking his own life. Law enforcement sources say Tamura's former coworker at the Horseshoe Casino purchased the gun legally, but they're still reviewing whether the sale to Tamura, who had a documented history of mental illness, was legal, adding the former coworker is cooperating. The same sources tell NBC News he also sold Tamura this black BMW that Tamura used to drive to New York City.
We have a lot of work to take a look at what was clearly the motive. Was anybody else involved?
We're also learning new details about what authorities found when they searched Tamura's Las Vegas apartment, including a second handwritten suicide note to his parents, writing, "When I look into you and Dad's eyes, all I see is disappointment. I love you, Mama. I'm sorry." Investigators also found several prescriptions in Tamura's name, including antipsychotic and anti-epileptic medications. Investigators believe Tamura may have been targeting NFL headquarters at the skyscraper. A suicide note found on his body indicated he believed he had CTE, a degenerative brain disease. The 27-year-old had played football in high school with the lone Neil.
I know one time for sure he had to sit out a game because he had a concussion.
He's a people person.
Meanwhile, the brother of slain security officer Alain Etienne remembered him as a hero.
Always doing his part to make the city of New York a little bit safer every day.
And 27-year-old Julia Hyman was the first victim laid to rest.
Julia changed our lives. She made us better friends, better listeners, and better people.
McLaughlin reporting. Law enforcement sources tell NBC News that Tamura received 2 phone calls during his drive to New York City, including one from an unknown caller in New Jersey on the day of the attack. Now to a shocking story out of Southern Virginia, where a city councilman was attacked on Wednesday. Police say a man confronted Danville Councilman Lee Vogler before pouring gasoline on him and setting him on fire. This morning, the suspect is in custody. NBC's Garrett Hake has more on this disturbing attack.
Police in a small Southern Virginia town have charged a 29-year-old man with attempted murder, accusing him of dousing Danville City Councilman Lee Vogler with a flammable liquid and setting him on fire. Witnesses at the local magazine where Vogler worked told police Shotzi Michael Buck Hayes somehow forced his way into the office and threw the liquid on Vogler, who exited the building, where Hayes then set him alight. The magazine's publisher shaken by the assault.
This type of senseless act of violence has to stop. You do not have the right as a human being to get upset with someone enough to lash out and attempt to harm them in any way, much less this way.
Witnesses provided a description of the suspect and his car. Hayes was arrested a short time later. Police say the two men knew each other and that the attack stemmed from a personal matter, not related to politics or Vogler's position on the city council.
This is Danville City Councilman Lee Vogler.
In 2012, Vogler, a Republican, became the youngest person ever elected to the council at 24. He was repeatedly re-elected, including last year, and wrote regularly for the magazine, often short posts about life with his wife and two young children.
He is a very gregarious, handsome gentleman with a tremendous energy.
Vogler was airlifted to an area hospital after the attack. The magazine's publisher says he was conscious and speaking at that time. There is no new word on his condition.
All right, Garrett, thank you so much.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.